Hello and good morning, Thailand. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jay, and joining me again today is Mike.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Indeed, Tim is once again on his holiday, sipping his coconuts on a beautiful beach somewhere in Thailand. So, just a quick update. If you missed yesterday's Thailand headlines and all the top stories, you can watch the video here, Thailand News Today, Jet providing all the hot topics and stories in Thailand. And if you missed our Tiger Bites episode, I highly suggest you watch that because Mike Kenner here goes off on all the trolls and all the haters that have something to say to him. So if you enjoy a little banter and jokes and hot saucy topics, I suggest you watch Tiger Bites over here. In today's episode, we will be talking about all the businesses, Mike, that have boomed and also failed, and perhaps what the government has done in Thailand to help these businesses. That's coming up right after this. And welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Thailand with me, Jay, and Mike. Mike, let me just start off the show by giving a quick COVID update. Today in Thailand, we had 228 COVID-related deaths, 14,176 new infections, 16,779 people were discharged from hospitals. However, we still have 142,644 people currently still in care. And in Phuket, Mike, we had 234 cases yesterday, 0 from the Sandbox, so they're all local infections. And currently, we still have 2,993 people still in care. And I hope these numbers and these trends do continue to go down. However, worrying signs for Phuket currently.
Yeah, but I think something I want to add, which is that if you have a COVID test in Thailand and it is positive, the current rules are that you have to go to a hospital as opposed to self-quarantine. And this is part of the issue. Did you know that, Jay?
Yes. So I do believe that if you are tested positive, you have the people can be in care in field hospitals and hospitals depending on the symptoms that you have. Some people have very few symptoms, but yes, a lot of the patients that are in field hospitals and hospitals do not necessarily need to be there.
Okay, so my issue with this personally is that if you are not sick and you've tested positive for COVID-19, have 0 symptoms, you're in hospital taking up valuable hospital bed space. And it's why there's these comments around, oh, the Phuket hospitals, for example, are full. Yes, they might be full, but with sick people or people that just have COVID-19 and 0 symptoms. Now, this creates a further issue around that if you test positive for COVID-19, because you have to go to hospital, how many people want to be willingly tested knowing that this is what awaits them if they are tested positive and have no symptoms? They have to spend 2 weeks in a field hospital. So I think the rules are actually in place and have been done quite cleverly, which stops people being tested out of their own free want. Because, you know, if in a more westernized country, you would get tested. If you're positive, you can self-quarantine at home for 2 weeks, which is still, you know, a problem. But I think that in Thailand, if you're tested positive, you have to go straight to hospital. So I think they've created a system that doesn't really encourage self-testing or the want to be tested. I think a lot of people who have any symptoms will probably just stay at home and avoid going to get tested because they do not want to be in hospital for 2 weeks. So I think it's underlying a problem with the actual policies in place by the current government in relation to this one.
Right. A good point there, Mike. Let's move on to another topic that will be taking over Thailand in the coming week. We have a tropical storm arriving in Thailand within the next 24 hours. And there's been a weather forecast of very heavy rainfall. Not so much in the south of Thailand, but the other regions of Thailand will be affected. There's an 80% chance of heavy rainfall. And a lot of the regions have actually been on alert and have been told to watch out for the reservoirs not being overrun, and there will possibly be floodings in many areas in Thailand. And the tropical storm is called Conson, Tropical Storm Conson, approaching Thailand very soon. So just wanted to tell everybody, be safe out there and prepare for heavy showers and possible flooding around your area.
Yeah, I think it's difficult in Thailand with the limited drainage systems that exist.
The thing is, they say that, you know, they've put people on alert and told them to monitor it, but living in Thailand, we know even with just normal heavy rain, you see floodings in your village, in your, on the streets in Bangkok. So now that there's a tropical storm coming, I hope nothing goes out of hand and doesn't get too bad. However, just be careful, everyone.
Agreed.
Right. For now, we're just going to take a short break, and we'll be back right after the top stories with Caitlin.
Hi, it's Kate with the Thaiger, here with today's top headlines. Police in Bangkok arrested 18 people last night at the Din Daeng intersection, which has been a major protest site in recent weeks. A young protest group who called themselves Talu Gas, which means mob through tear gas, gathered last night at the intersection. Police say 9 of the 18 people arrested are minors. Officers say the protesters blocked traffic, and some people threw explosives like handmade bombs and firecrackers, causing fires in several spots around the intersection, including a fire at an electrical control panel at the Din Daeng tunnel. The parents of the teenagers who are arrested will be questioned, and police say the parents could face charges under the Child Protection Act. At another rally last night, led by a different group at the Asok intersection, police say there was no violence, but officers seized a vehicle with a loudspeaker and arrested 3 protesters. Koh Samui will switch from their Samui Plus reopening model to a more relaxed sandbox program like Phuket. The Koh Samui reopening has been off to a slow start, with just more than 500 travelers who have entered Thailand since the scheme was launched on July 15th. But the district chief estimates that with the change, there will be over 10,000 nights booked in hotels. Under the previous plan, visitors who were fully vaccinated against COVID-19 had to stay at their Samui Plus approved hotel for the first 3 days. For the next 4 days, the traveler could leave their hotel, but were only allowed to travel on specific routes to approved destinations on the island. After 7 days in Samui, visitors were free to travel to neighboring islands off the Surat Thani coast. And after 14 days in Thailand, the travelers were free to go throughout the country as normal. The new program will be similar to the Phuket sandbox model, where visitors will just need to spend 14 days on the island before they are allowed to travel to other places in Thailand. A new program called the Sandbox Safety Zone in School is being launched to reopen 68 schools in Thailand. Schools reopening under the pilot program must be boarding schools, and the schools must follow health measures set by the government. The select schools must have approval from parents and the Provincial Disease Committee to reopen. There must also be isolation spaces and safety zones set up, and the schools will be inspected by the Education Ministry and the Public Health Ministry. In Chiang Mai, a couple is being held in a police custody after their daughter, who is almost 2 years old, went missing. The girl disappeared sometime between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Sunday evening. The mother was cooking and the father was taking out the trash at the time. Heat-seeking drones and sniffer dogs have also been used. Divers and a rescue unit also searched a pond near the village yesterday, and multiple police agencies and people in the village have been searching for the girl. The village chief suspects someone kidnapped the child, while police suspect the child might be lost in the woods. The Mirror Foundation, which helps look for missing children in Thailand, posted on Facebook saying the girl's family recently moved to the village, and not everyone in the village may know them. They add that the village is remote and surrounded by mountains and forests, which is far from the district's township, but cars do sometimes drive through the village. In Vietnam, a man received a 5-year jail sentence for breaking home quarantine rules and spreading COVID-19. The 28-year-old has been convicted of spreading dangerous infectious diseases to other people after he left Ho Chi Minh City and traveled back to his home province. He didn't undergo the mandatory 21-day home quarantine. He tested positive for COVID-19 shortly after his return home. According to court documents, the man's breach of the home medical quarantine regulation led to many people becoming infected with COVID-19, and 1 person died. And those are the top headlines today. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to Good Morning Thailand. You're watching the show with me, Jay, and Mike. Mike, today we're going to be talking about mainly businesses that have boomed in Thailand and also that have failed post-COVID and during the COVID era. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin. Now, something happened to Bitcoin last night. I believe Bitcoin has lost a little bit of its value in a flash crash.
That's correct. So I think this is in a precursor is El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as national currency. Now, the reason I believe they did this is because they have a massive inflow of currency coming from workers outside of El Salvador that are sending money home, and their current currency, well, the El Salvador peso, I think is very unstable, so they utilize US dollars. So Bitcoin was rallying knowing that El Salvador is using this as a national currency. Now, there's only, I think, 6 to 7 million people in El Salvador. So it's a very small demographic, but in relation to the crypto markets, you know, small news can cause big changes in the market. So Bitcoin started rallying, and I think that people were leveraging on the futures exchange heavy positions. And when you're on the futures exchange or the derivatives markets, effectively you're betting on the price going up, and for every dollar it goes up, you might be betting $100 per dollar.
Okay.
But as the price dropped, it wiped out a load of future positions, and there was a flash crash that wiped off 15% of Bitcoin's value.
Wow. Right, for any one of you who is actually interested in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, Mike, next Wednesday you're actually holding the Thaiger Digital Summit, where you will be talking more about this in depth.
Yeah, correct. So next Wednesday there is a digital event called the Thaiger Digital Summit. I'm talking to 7 of the biggest tech CEOs in Thailand. One of them, we believe, is the BitCrub CEO, who is the biggest crypto exchange in Thailand. I'm going to talk about digitalization and tokenization of digital assets in more depth, and how this is really affecting and driving the future of the Thailand economics and monetary policy. So it should be really, really interesting.
Right, Mike, now let's get into our topic today of talking about businesses that have boomed and also failed during the COVID era and after the post-COVID era. Now, my question is regarding the access to business. Convenience is key, and there's been a big trend of digitization. Everyone has gone online, haven't they?
Yeah. Yes, of course, everyone's gone. If you wasn't online 10 years ago, I mean, you must have been kidding yourself. But I think that what's happened during COVID is it's highlighted convenience as a main driver of success in relation to business, and I'll give you multiple examples of this happening. So it could be as simple as, you know, accessing video on demand at home, you know, something like Netflix or the equivalent streaming services. The multitude of how much content you can actually access has driven these businesses in such an easy way. This is the same with food delivery services, the same as e-commerce shops like Lazada and Shopee, you know, which are basically Amazon type businesses that exist in Thailand. So anything that provides convenience within this market has done really, really well, because people at home, you know, the trend is they don't really want to be going out interacting with people during this process. So convenience is really at the heart of some of these digital successes that have been happening.
Now, so like you said, for example, access to real estate has changed. We were talking about this earlier. People might not go to restaurants as much, but Food Panda has taken over. People don't go to shopping malls, but Shopee has taken over. You can shop online. And people don't need to go to cinemas because they have Netflix. Now, I guess my question is basically, if you're going to start a business in Thailand, let's say you're about to move to Thailand, or you're still currently in Thailand, you were owning a hotel, tourism is dead, you can't do that anymore. Where do you think the future is going in Thailand? Like, so let's go specific to either Phuket or in Bangkok. If I had a chance to start a business, what is the most chance of success I'm going to have? Do I need to be fully digitalized, and in what field?
It's a really interesting question. I think that what the pandemic has done is really eradicate some of the low-level competition that existed. There was lots of small businesses out there that wasn't really providing great service, but was just benefiting on the numbers of sheer people that was in the country. So you could basically sell anything with any quality of service and really still turn a profit. I think this has disappeared, but there's lots of opportunities that are really opening up. They're coming into the market. For example, I don't know, you could look at anything from rental car companies that have basically ceased to exist, not just in Thailand, but we've seen bankruptcy of large companies globally in the rentals market, so coming in, providing a great service in relation to car rental or bike rental in a new way that's more convenient. For example, the way it currently works in Thailand and turning up at a rental company, I mean, if you've kind of been there, the experience is quite low. You can't select your car or bike online unless it's one of the big airport rental companies. So I think, if you're coming in, look at the digitization of assets and how you could do this in a much better way. And there's lots of opportunities that the pandemic has created in relation to business and enterprise specifically.
So let's say, for argument purposes, what do we do for the businesses that refuse to change? Now, I understand it's important to be online, but all of these people who are already in Phuket, who've spent their life savings in, restaurants, we're talking about shops within malls, what's their future? Is it adapt to survive or be left behind?
It's also a really good question. So on this conference I'm doing, the topic is disrupt or die.
Okay.
And we've seen this not just in the pandemic, we've seen this all over the place in previous times. I mean, if we look at Polaroid, where's Polaroid now? And you look at just the camera industry, where's Kodak now? And where is Sony in relation to cameras, right? This whole market changed because of innovation, and companies who failed to adopt disappeared. We can see this in Blockbuster and how the transition to Netflix. Blockbuster could have bought Netflix for $1 million. They did not see the opportunity and kind of didn't innovate, and now Blockbuster failed to exist. We've seen this in multiple industries in relation to innovation. Now, when the market changes, there's a great book, I don't know if any of our viewers have read it, it's called Who Moved My Cheese? And it's all about change. It's actually kind of like a child's book, and it's about 3 mice in a cage running around, and the cheese gets old, and which type of mice sees the changes happening and how they react. But I think this is what the market's happening. People have to look at the market and think, okay, how do we perceive the changes moving forward, and how will this end up, and then react to what's going to happen, as opposed to sit there and be like, yeah, we're just going to do the same. If we do the same and you don't change, your business will probably be disrupted by someone who will make that change. And so we've seen this all over the place. I think it's small businesses have to look at the changing landscape and how they can really adapt and move online. If you're a retailer, for example, you have to be on Shopee or Lazada. If you're a restaurant, you have to be on Foodpanda or the equivalent service, right? For distribution, you can't just be like, well, we're not going to do that, because unless you have an amazing product where people are going to consistently come to you, people turn into convenience more and more.
But then, there's always the point of companies like Shopee and Foodpanda, because they've sort of got a monopoly or such a big market share, they can charge whatever commission they want. What little chance do small restaurants have? What little chance do small shops have? So, I mean, you're right, it is adapt to survive. However, what would you say to these companies that perhaps take advantage?
Okay, so I get it that Shopee and Lazada and marketplaces in general charge a commission. But if I was in their position, I was running a small retail outlet or a small restaurant, I would work out how I can get the best exposure on these marketplaces the best way. How can I become number one on these marketplaces? Imagine you're number one on Amazon. Right? How much money would you be able to make? And I think these retailers should look how they can actually take their product, utilize these marketplaces in the best way, and really create a great distribution network. And I think they will succeed. So if you're a retailer there, go onto Lazada, go onto Shopee, work out how you can provide the best service, focus on customer reviews, and not just, just price and, the metrics that you have, previously focused on, and work out how to game these platforms and become really good at it. And I think you will find that your business doesn't just return, you have more success, more benefits than you had previously because of the distribution effects.
Right, Mike, thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break and go into the regional headlines. And when we're back, we're going to talk about what the government has actually done to help businesses during COVID and after COVID in Thailand. We'll be back right after this. A Vietnamese man in Hanoi has been sentenced to 5 years in jail for spreading COVID-19 for breaching home quarantine rules after he traveled to his home province of Cà Mau from coronavirus hotspot Ho Chi Minh City in July. South Korea has successfully test-fired a homegrown submarine-launched ballistic missile as it seeks to build up its forces to defend itself from nuclear-armed North Korea. Myanmar's shadow government, formed by opponents of military rule, called for a nationwide uprising against the junta on Tuesday amid reports of new protests and flare-up in fighting between the army and ethnic military groups. The Malaysian king has told Prime Minister Ismail Sabri a confidence vote to prove his majority is not needed, according to Malaysia's de facto law minister Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar. The Philippines has reimposed a virus lockdown in the capital Manila on Tuesday, just a day after announcing the lifting of a stay-at-home order for more than 13 million people. Welcome back to Good Morning Thailand. Mike is here with me in the studio. Mike, I have a question for you. Now, you own businesses in Thailand and you operate businesses that have more than 150 employees. Now, during COVID and after COVID, my first question to you is, what type of assistance has the government given you for your business or for your employees?
I mean, a good, interesting question again. Sorry, Joe, you're full of them today. But the answer is very little. I mean, I think during the pandemic when it started, we had 100 plus staff spread across a lot of digital businesses we own. And we was like, what are the options here with all the markets closing and lockdown? So the first thing is we went to the banks. And because we're a foreign-owned business, even though we employ 100 plus Thai people, there's zero assistance from the banks. We went to the banks that we bank in consistently and we give them a large amount of revenue. Zero assistance. It was quite shocking. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. If we're a Thai-owned business, they might have given us assistance. I think it would be quite low. But because we're a foreign-owned business, they would not give us any assistance. And how could we, capitalize our company to keep these people employed? Shame on you, banks, by the way. Shame on you. You know who you are.
Yeah.
So the banks provided no assistance whatsoever. And the government, well, their assistance was very, very limited, as in it didn't exist.
Yeah.
I think the issues we had was that you couldn't really lay off staff. I mean, the labour laws in Thailand are very, very strict in relation to redundancies. It's very hard to downsize in a pandemic with your staff without all the legal and requirements that the government put in place, especially around the Labour Department, around providing huge redundancies. And they didn't really give you any solutions. It was like, we're not going to give you any money to help you. So if your company goes bust, it does, but you have to pay all your staff. And we were left in a real difficult situation across a lot of our businesses when the pandemic, kind of outbreak. So I would say that the government assistance is virtually zero. I mean, what they should have done is they should have got behind the companies to keep people employed. That would have been, a golden economic strategy. Okay. Start capitalizing not just big businesses but small businesses as well, so that we could literally keep people employed, so they wouldn't have to have no money to eat. And the second part is the other side is that we didn't want to let our staff go because we know that there is no government assistance if you don't have a job. Mm-hmm. So we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. So during the pandemic, we actually decided to hire more people to give people the opportunity to work. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting scenario we went into. So we rolled the dice slightly to make that and increase our employment across the companies. So government assistance and banking assistance in Thailand, unfortunately, is extremely limited, and it's a real problem of the Thailand, economic market in general.
Right. Okay, Mike. Now let's talk about thankfully, you've done well and you have survived the pandemic. A lot of businesses haven't. Certain businesses if you're a hairdresser, if you own massage shops, if you work in spas, businesses that require people to physically come in who are unable to digitize their business have been unable to survive. Now, one thing that I actually wanted to talk to you about today is the education in Thailand. Now, we can go on and on about education, but education has changed due to the pandemic. Now, we have a lot of international schools in Thailand, in Bangkok, in Chiang Mai, in Phuket, in all the major cities. However, due to the pandemic, there has been so much online learning. Now, I guess my main question to you is, a lot of the international schools charge a ridiculous amount of money to send for parents to send their kids to school. We're talking upwards of 200,000, 300,000 baht. How does it make sense for parents to send their kids to the big schools at all if they're just going to be learning online at home for many more months to come?
So I think that this is an ongoing debate anyway. I think, is the education system flawed? I mean, For myself, I went to a good school, a good university, and learned virtually nothing that was actually relevant to life, because the syllabus is so old. This is not something that I'm bringing up. This is a debate that's happening, for tens of years, where the syllabus is so far behind. In Thailand, it's even further behind of where the rest of the West is. So I think that if you want to learn new skills, it's all online now. I mean, there's nothing you can't get online, because I think the issue with Thailand is, and in specific, is that you have to learn from the best teachers, right? Just general. If you want to learn a skill set, whether it's a sporting skill set or academic skill set, depending on who teaches you is how quickly you will learn, and then obviously your capacity to learn as well. So I think somewhere like Phuket, which has these very expensive schools, do they attract the best talent? Of course they don't. I mean, you won't see the best academics coming to Phuket to teach the students, yet the international schools will charge through the roof to keep their students in place. So
yeah, that's the point, because private schools are basically privately run businesses. They have to take into account how they will survive and how they will make the money. Now, according to those schools, they have experts in their own fields, and their teachers are very well qualified. We're not judging or commenting on their qualifications as teachers, but you're right. Are they highly intellectual professionals who've won prizes and are notable for their field? Perhaps not. That might be in higher education, but they do charge a ridiculous amount of money. But does it make sense to charge that same amount of money for online learning school? Are we going to see a lot of parents take their kids out and perhaps spend that money on homeschooling? They'd hire a private tutor to teach their kid everything that they need to learn in life in terms of studies, rather than spend that money and just sit in front of a computer all day.
A great question again, Jay. So, because I invest in digital business, we get a lot of stuff speaking about something called EDU tech, which is educational tech, and it is absolutely booming at the moment. I mean, the demand for this is insane, because if you want to learn technology, you want to learn off a technologist, not someone who's read a book and then will teach you the book they just read. If you want to learn science, you want to learn off a scientist. You want to learn health, you want to learn off a good qualified doctor. And I think this is the capacity that it really offers, so, the online education offers. Now, I think that this whole industry, and which is an industry, which is education, is absolutely rife for disruption. It's happening now, where you have choice. I mean, you could be a Thailand-based student taking a course online from US-based instructors or Australian-based instructors who are very good in their field of expertise, and great teachers, and can really help the students to learn in the best capacity. So I think we're going to see this change. I think that the pandemic has highlighted that online learning, because this is what students have been done while all the schools have been shut. Besides the interaction you get socially among students, which is important, but you learn some social skills, which sometimes some good, some aren't great, because of obviously, time at school is not always great. People get bullied and things like this, which happens, but you do get that social interaction, which is important. But bar that, the quality of education that is given is very, very, is very, very wide in terms of what kind of qualities is offered.
Okay. Right, Mike. So I guess those are all the topics for today. I hope you all enjoyed our show for today. I'd like to thank Mike for joining the show today.
Yeah. You're welcome.
You're welcome, Mike. I'd like to thank Jason behind the cameras. And if you enjoyed our show today, please click like and subscribe to our channel. If you have any comments for us, for our show today, for our shows yesterday, please leave them in the comment section below. And have a great Wednesday.